3 sinister true stories of haunted workplaces. Terrifying secrets revealed when a lone Tom's heart raced as he trudged through the empty halls of the dimly lit office. Shadows lurked at the edges of the fluorescent lights, whispering secrets that sent chills down his spine. The air felt thick, almost alive, as if something unseen was waiting in anticipation. This wasn't just any ordinary night shift. It was a descent into darkness and exploration of a corporate nightmare that had once thrived, now reduced to whispers of layoffs and desperation. Every creak echoed in his mind, amplifying the dread that clawed at him. As he leaned over his desk, sorting through abandoned papers, he caught murmurs that seemed to pulsate from the very walls around him, a ghostly choir that recounted tales of betrayal, greed, and frantic employees who once roamed these very halls. "You'll lose everything," the voices hissed, twisting their words around his mind like a noose. His stomach churned at the thought of failing his family. He couldn't allow it. Not after all they had worked for. In another part of the building, Samantha sat shivering at her desk, attempting to ignore the prickling of her skin. The marketing team's unsettling conversations about company turmoil danced in her thoughts, but it was the flickering lights that drew her attention. Each time they flickered, she could have sworn she saw faces pale, ghostly figures bathed in sorrow. They were caught in a loop of despair, permanently bound to the spot where ambition had led them to ruin. Her breath caught in her throat as one figure reached out, fingers splayed in a desperate plea. "Speak out before it's too late," the specter seemed to whisper, her voice echoing with a haunting urgency. Suddenly, a shudder ran through the building, rattling her from her thoughts. This was more than a malfunction. It felt like the very foundation of the company was shaking beneath the weight of corruption. She clenched her fists, struggling against the fear that threatened to swallow her whole. Then there was Jim, the ever-watchful security guard, pacing the deserted corridors with a sense of dread heavier than his keys. He was no stranger to fear, but today felt different, a tension in the air that gnawed at him. He had seen too much in these walls, secrets that haunted him during his sleepless nights. His mind raced, recalling moments when he could stepped in, could save someone. Now the shadows felt alive, seeming to slither in and out of peripheral vision, taunting him. His flashlight flickered as he turned sharply. Was that a figure he'd just glimpsed? Panic surged through him. No, this couldn't be happening. He stumbled, the flashlight beam dancing wildly over the walls until he caught sight of the office exit, where a ghostly form lingered. Heart pounding, he approached cautiously, learning that every step forward pushed deeper into the darkness of his memories. "Am I losing my mind?" he wondered rapidly. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The 3 of them, unbeknownst to one another, were converging into a nightmare intertwined by their fears. As Tom felt his legs become heavier, Samantha's eyes widened with the understanding of her own fear. This building served as a cruel reminder of lost lives and crushed dreams. Jim, sensing their shared doom, heard the whispers escalate in volume, beckoning him to follow. Those whispers, once vague and sweet with promises, now shrieked truths so loud they threatened to suffocate. This place wasn't just a factory of ideas but a graveyard of ambitions buried deep under layers of deceit. Tom, Samantha, and Jim were now wrapped in a tapestry of ghosts, cloaked in the agony of their shared reality. And as they faced the walls that contained their darkest fears, a chilling truth settled in. Something terrible was about to emerge from the darkness, and they might not survive to tell the tale. What did the shadows crave, and what would they do to protect their secrets? The air grew colder, and an unnatural stillness blanketed the office. It was as if time itself had paused, stretching out dread like a taut wire. Tom swallowed hard, his throat dry. He could feel the oppressive weight of despair around him, the whispers wrapping tighter around his thoughts. The darkness seemed to pulse, as if alive, and he could not shake the feeling that the shadows were watching, waiting for him to make a mistake. Just down the hall, Samantha rubbed her arms for warmth and turned in her chair, drawn by an instinct she couldn't explain. The whispers had grown louder, synchronized in a haunting symphony that swelled and waned. They punctuated the silence with tales of workers who had come before her, trapped by the very ambition that once fueled this place. Faces flickered in her mind, colleagues, friends worn by worry and despair. With a shudder, she fought the urge to scream. "I need to get out," she thought, desperation clawing at her edges. But the thought of leaving her workspace, of venturing into the hallway where danger lurked, paralyzed her. Jim stood at the entrance of the building, flashlight shaking in his hand. The shadows that had once felt benign now twisted around him. His instincts screamed that something wasn't right. He watched as the light danced over the walls, terrified of where it would land next. Was that a fleeting shadow, or just the trick of his tired eyes? He took a cautious step forward, adrenaline pumping in his veins. A sudden crash rang out, a deafening sound echoing through the desolate floors. It sent a jolt through all three of them. Tom and Samantha froze, their hearts racing in sync. Jim's muscles tightened, the air shifting palpably as terror seeped in deeper. "Who did that?" Tom mouthed, struggling to put the pieces together, but no answer came. Samantha felt her breath hitch as she was irresistibly drawn back into the pulsating glow of her monitor. The screen flickered erratically, distorting the images like a faint memory fighting to break free. Voices clamored in an ethereal chorus, rising and falling in urgency as she leaned towards the light, a compulsion to understand drowning out her sense of self-preservation. "They want something from us?" she thought, a shiver running through her spine. In that moment, the walls surrounding Tom pulsated, nearly breathing around him. He could hear their cry, now a desperate, angry wail that tore free from the depths of his mind. "Get out before it's too late," he stumbled back, nearly collapsing. Would they heed the warning? Or would they be swept away by the tide of lost souls yearning for a voice? How many lives taken in silence? "Help us!" the voices begged, crescendoing into a terrifying roar that rattled the very foundation beneath their feet. The lights above sputtered violently, illuminating the office with flashes of ghostly white. Figures began to appear, their faces twisted in grief and regret, mouths moving silently yet intensely. Every one of them seemed to stretch their hands toward Tom, Samantha, and Jim, begging for release. "Fight!" Jim shouted, certainty pushing through his thrumming panic. But fight what? The questions swirled amidst their confusion. With desperation thickening the air, the trio looked at each other, recognizing the blend of fear and resolve blossoming in their gazes. They wouldn't go down quietly, not here, not when the darkness was ready to claim them. As the whispers morphed into a rising storm, they braced themselves, knowing they were on the cusp of discovering the truth, the kind that could tear their fragile sanity apart. What would they face next? And could they even trust each other as the shadows bared down around them? The floor trembled, and in that moment, another crash echoed, louder, more unmistakable, from deep within the building. "What was that?" Samantha whispered, her voice barely above a breath. But the shadows pressed closer, and the answer began to unfold just beyond their reach. The echoes of the crash reverberated against the cold walls, sending a fresh wave of terror coursing through them. Tom clenched his fists, grounding himself amidst the chaos threatening to swallow him whole. He felt the hot breath of fear on his neck, the shadows now a swirling mass moving like a predator narrowing in on its prey. "Where is that coming from?" Jim said, his voice trembling, yet laced with a courage he didn't feel. He moved a step closer to the flickering light of Samantha's monitor, where the cold glow seemed to pulse in rhythm with their rising panic. It wasn't just a light. It was a beacon, or perhaps a last hope if they could just decipher its warnings. Samantha broke her gaze from the screen. The urge to flee battled with a strange compulsion to stay. "There are voices," she whispered, her breath hitching on the edges of terror. They know, but before she could finish, another crash shook the floor, louder this time, like heavy machinery clicking into life. The lights flickered harder, and all three felt it, an electric tension. A low growl filled the air, a sound so wrong it made goosebumps rise on their skin. It was a warning or a promise. Tom glanced at Jim, who was gripping the flashlight like a lifeline. "We need to find out what's causing that," he said, a mixture of dread and determination in his eyes. "Or we need to get out," Samantha countered, fear pouring into her words. She could hear whispers swell from the depths of the building, a haunting siren call beckoning her to move. But towards what? Ignoring her protests, Jim led the way down the dark hallway, the beam of the flashlight revealing only swirling shadows and peeling paint. Every crack in the floor was a potential trap waiting to spring. They walked slowly, the cold air biting at their skin, each step heightening their awareness of the incomprehensible terror around them. Suddenly, a shivering connection sparked within Samantha's mind. "Wait, the archives," she breathed, realization dawning. "Do you remember the files the office stored on the 7th floor? It's where they compiled all the accounts of employee disappearances." Tom's heart raced. Could there be something there? Something that might explain the spirits clamoring for release? The whispers seemed to agree, rising in urgency. "Let us go. We'll find answers," Jim said with renewed fervor, thundering up the staircase. The shadows danced around them, hiding secrets, paths of treachery. Moving up, they felt every floor beneath them pulse with a heartbeat. They finally reached the archives, the door partially ajar, a menacing invitation. A sudden draft swept through, chilling them to the bone. With a shared look of defiance, they pushed through the door, its groan echoing against the stillness inside. Files lay strewn about, their contents whispering tales of despair. As Samantha reached for an open file, her hand trembled. The faces of those lost flickered through her mind, aligning with the figures that had reached out moments earlier. "This can't be all," she murmured, flipping through pages hastily. And then something brushed against her arm. Samantha recoiled, spinning around to find an apparition looming behind them. It was one of the lost souls, features twisted in torment. It pointed toward a specific file, its mouth moving silently, desperate. "Don't look," Tom shouted, but it was too late. Samantha had already slipped the file out from under a pile. The moment she opened it, a chilling wave engulfed the room. The shadows surged as if pulled by an unseen force, screaming in silence. They were no longer just witnesses. They were part of the haunting. "Read it," Jim yelled, but Samantha was frozen, eyes wide, reading the words. Her blood ran cold. The file detailed a cover-up not just of events that had occurred in this building, but dark rituals that had taken place quietly, feeding the spirits trapped within these walls. And then, a thunderous crash echoed again, rage unleashed around them, as the darkness began to close in. "What did you find?" Tom screamed over the chaos. But just as Samantha was about to speak, the ghost moved closer, eyes burning with intensity. The room shifted, reality fraying, something unspeakable looming just beyond their understanding. They were in deep now, and there was no telling what would happen next. As shadows thickened and their sanity teetered, someone had to break the cycle. But who would make the impossible choice first? In that moment of poised dread, Samantha realized the truth held danger beyond their imagination. Could they trust the dead? Or was there more to this unfolding nightmare than they ever anticipated? Time dragged heavily as uncertainty slithered between them, and they stood frozen. What if there was no way to survive this darkness, only to become part of it? Panic gripped Samantha as she struggled to tear her eyes away from the ghost. The air turned electric, swirling around them, thick with dread. Tom and Jim stood rooted to the spot, their gazes drifting from the file to the wraith-like figure. It twitched, eyes swollen with something akin to desperation, as if urging them to uncover deeper truths hidden away in the darkness. "What's happening?" Jim stammered, terror tightening his throat. The spirit, a whisper of its former self, pointed again. Fueled by an instinct she couldn't control, Samantha stepped closer, drawn to a collection of documents sprawled across an old desk. Each sheet held a story of despair, faces of once lively workers, now just memories trapped in this abyss. Don't. Thomas' warning sliced through her thoughts, but the apparition's silent plea held her captive. She rifled through the pages, each one deeper than the last, revealing twisted experiments conducted under the guise of corporate innovation. Employees disappeared, sacrificed to fuel a cycle of occult madness. Look at this, she finally gasped, flipping a page frantically. They were offering sacrifices to gain power in their business. To fed the spirits, this is why they won. Tea leave. The shadows, now alive with sinister intent, began to writhe and pulse, ominous whispers crescendoing into a frenzy of disembodied voices. Tom tried to back away, but the door swung shut, sealing them in. Get us out of here, Jim shouted, hammering on the wood with desperation. But the wails of the lost rose up, a cacophony of agony, punctuated by the loud clatter of falling files around them. A single scream pierced through the chaos, echoing off the walls, setting off a reflexive reaction. They huddled together, feeling the entity's rage taking form, trying to form a barrier against the unfolding terror. The ghostly figure twisted and contorted, its mouth opening wide in a silent scream, a melding of their past horrors surfacing into grotesque reality. Why? Samantha shouted with all her breath. What do you want? For a moment, silence swallowed the room, save for the echo of their gasps. Then, with a sudden rush, the entity surged forward, rushing from out of the dark. It reached for Samantha, icy fingers brushing against her cheek, sending a shock wave through her body. Time stood still. She could see its pain, its fury, and a hunger that chilled her to the bone. Located. Eliminate the last. A raspy voice hissed through the shadows, a fragmented sentence that echoed like a death knell. The words stung in the air. What's the last? Tom asked, the words barely leaving his lips when the entity recoiled, eyes narrowing in intense focus on Samantha. She felt the room shake, each tremor raking her insides with fear. I don't know, she screamed back, torn between the spirit's despair and her own terrified disbelief. Just tell us what to do. The entity faded for a heartbeat, lost in the dark corners of the room. And in that brief moment, the shadows shifted again, casting an unexpected silhouette. There was something else, something ancient lurking beyond the veil. Find it before it finds you, the ghost whispered, dissolving into a dark mist. A sudden understanding flooded Samantha's mind. They weren't just trapped. They were hunters and hunted. Someone had summoned the darkness, and now it was time to confront the source. But it was too late to run. Every choice made would now lead them deeper into this horrific labyrinth. As the walls began to close in, thick with sorrow and malice, a flicker of light broke through. A staircase descending into the heart of the building, where unspeakable things awaited. Tom and Jim exchanged hollow glances, fear and resolve intertwining. Let us finish it, Jim said, though his voice trembled. They could feel the weight of the darkness clawing at their backs. Before it's too late, Samantha agreed, heart racing. And just like that, they took the first step down into the unknown, each echo a haunting reminder that they might not be the only ones searching for answers in the dark. What awaited them below threatened to unravel everything they thought they knew. Would they be able to stop the cycle, or would they become another tragic tale, lost within the building's sinister embrace? Only the depths would tell. Samantha's heart raced as they stepped onto the staircase, an unsettling chill wrapping around them. The air grew heavier, thick with the weight of unseen eyes. Each creak of the steps reverberated in her chest, a countdown echoing in rhythm with her pounding heart. While Tom and Jim followed, her mind churned with dread. Are we really doing this? Tom whispered, glancing back at the solid door that sealed their fate above. We can't turn back, Samantha replied, forcing the words out as bravado. But a sense of foreboding gripped her, a tight coil of fear that tightened with each descending step. The staircase spiraled deeper, and soon the dim light from above faded into a suffocating darkness. They became silhouettes against an oppressive blackness, the shadows swallowing them whole. With every step further down, The temperature dropped, the air thick with a funky mix of mildew and decay. "This is where they did it," Jim murmured, his voice barely above a whisper, quivering with anxiety. "Can't you feel it?" Samantha said, stopping to scan the dim void around them. A prickling sensation crept along her spine. "It's alive, like it knows we're here." Suddenly, a whimper echoed through the dark. It left a tang of salt in the air, like a teardrop for a heartbeat. They all froze. "Did you hear that?" Tom said, wide-eyed. "Came from over there." Samantha pointed into the darkness, where shadows seemed to dance. She squinted but could see nothing, just the infinite black. Without waiting for an answer, she edged toward the sound, drawn by a pull she couldn't resist. Tom and Jim followed, anxiety knotting in their bellies. As they moved further down, the whimpering grew, morphing into low, haunting cries. "Please help us," a collective voice seemed to echo. Each syllable slipped through the dark, crawling under their skin. "Who's there?" Samantha shouted, desperation rising like bile. The echoes stopped, plunging the space into a thick silence. Then, like thunder cracking, laughter erupted from the darkness, low and raucous. It washed over them, accompanied by a sharp gust of wind that sent a chill racing through their bones. "We should go back now," Jim said, panic rising in his chest, sweat beading on his forehead. "No, we need to know the truth," she insisted, shaking off the fear that threatened to root her in place. "We need to find the last." As they pressed forward, shattered glass crunched underfoot, evidence of a chaotic past left behind. An eerie flicker of light broke through the black, illuminating a tattered sign hanging crooked. "Department of Experiments." The words glowed with a sickly hue, reminiscent of the memories etched into this forsaken place. "Why do I feel like we're walking into a trap?" Tom's voice trembled as they caught sight of silhouettes moving just out of reach in the semi-darkness. "Because we are," Samantha said, blood running cold. And as if on cue, the ground trembled beneath them, a primal roar rising from the depths, shaking dust from the walls. Tattered whispers swirled around them, merging into a chaotic symphony of cries. "Run!" Jim yelled, turning to bolt back the way they came. "Wait!" Samantha shouted, but the walls seemed to close and each step reverberated like a heartbeat, quickening with their fear. But as they turned to flee, the flickering light morphed into something else, something grotesque and far more sinister. "What is that?" Tom gasped as their eyes widened in horror at the shape forming in the shadows, a grotesque amalgamation of the spirits they had disturbed. It loomed nearer, its outline solidifying, a tall figure with hollow eyes, a hideous grin splitting its face. Samantha's breath hitched in her throat. "Run!" she screamed, knowing that this time, flight was their only hope. As they stumbled backward, the entity hissed, "You sought the truth, now you will pay." The supernatural force pushing them back felt like a cold hand clamping down their necks. And just as they reached the staircase, the entity let out a bone-chilling laugh, a sound that promised the depths yet held many more secrets. Their descent into horror only just beginning. What lay behind them threatened to consume them whole, and every direction felt hopeless. Could they outrun the darkness? Or was the truth about to swallow them into its eternal embrace? The creature's laughter echoed, a sound that vibrated through the air like a warning bell. Samantha felt ice run through her veins as Tom and Jim dashed past her, their desperate movements a blur of panic. She hesitated, the urge to turn back, to face the entity, wrestling with the instinct to follow her friends. "Come on!" Jim yelled, and the urgency in his voice snapped her back to reality. She spun around and sprinted after them. The staircase was a treacherous descent, each step feeling like a leap into an oncoming void. Shadows clung to the walls, mocking their pace. A heavy rasp dragged behind them, pushing Samantha forward as she fought against the suffocating grasp of terror. "Where do we go?" Tom gasped, heart beating like a drum, his eyes darting around in the dark. "We need to find a way out. We can't let it catch us," Samantha shouted, glancing back. The creature loomed at the top of the staircase, a ghastly silhouette shrouded in darkness, its fingers outstretched, beckoning them closer with a sinister grace. They bolted down a corridor, the air thick with dust and dread. Old photographs lined the walls, each face frozen in anguish, their expressions warped and twisted. One particular image caught her breath. An old woman with hollow eyes seemed to gaze into her soul. It sent a shiver racing down her spine. "Don't look at them," Jim shouted, pulling her forward. "Just keep running." They passed by rusted doors with barred windows, each one whispering secrets too awful to hear. Fragments of voices stirred within, calling out for help but drowned by an air thick with despair. Samantha felt their sorrow tug at her, pulling her heart like a weight dragging her down. Suddenly, Jim stumbled. "I can't," he gasped, collapsing against the wall. "I can't get up," Samantha urged, panic mingling with her determination. She and Tom grabbed him, dragging him to his feet before the darkness could wrap around him like a predator. A low growl echoed from the direction they had just come, the sound slithering through the air. Sweat dripped from their brows as they reached an intersection, 3 paths branching out before them, each shadowy and foreboding. "Which way?" Tom breathed, shoulders heaving. "Split up," Samantha shouted, frantic. "We'll find something, a way out." "No way. We stick together," Jim protested, eyes wild. But the roar from behind them grew louder, reverberating through the hall like thunder. "We don't have time," Samantha insisted, her voice climbing in desperation. "Fine," Tom shouted back, fear overcoming rational thought. "Form a plan. We meet back at the first door." In a flash, they took off, Samantha veering right, Jim left, and Tom charging straight ahead. The shadows seemed to ripple as she fled, a creeping dread coursing through her veins. Her footsteps echoed, swallowed by the darkness. She stumbled upon a small room, its door ajar. Hesitating, she peered inside. Broken tables and discarded equipment lay scattered about, a mausoleum of forgotten experiments. A flickering light caught her eye. The dim glow pulsed like a heartbeat, emanating from the far corner. She inched closer, dread curling in her stomach. As she stepped inside, the light illuminated a bizarre apparatus, tubes writhing like snakes, connected to something that looked like a human figure, encased in glass. "Help us," the figure murmured, a fragile whisper of hope mixed with despair. Terror crashed over her. A warning shivered in her bones. She backed away, horrified, but then the glass began to crack. Something inside stirred, enormous and monstrous. "Time us up, Samantha," a voice stitched from the shadows echoed coldly. A fierce chill railed through her, and as the lights flickered wildly, she turned to escape. But the door slammed shut, trapping her within. Outside, the growls evolved into screams, 3 voices intertwined, calling her name amid an inferno of chaos. The walls seemed to pulse, darkness seeping closer like a tide rising and threatening to drown her. She was no longer alone. The glass shattered, and she faced the horror flaring forth, an army of shadowy figures joined together, their hollow eyes locked on her with an insatiable hunger. She took a deep breath, adrenaline rushing through her as she made her choice. But just before she could flee, a hand shot out from the writhing mass. "Join us," it hissed. Desperation surged within her. Would she abandon her friends? Would they ever find each other again in this labyrinth of nightmares? Would any of them emerge alive? Samantha's heart raced as the darkness loomed, and with it, the truth she had been seeking. What awaited her when she stepped deeper into madness? The impact of the glass shattering filled the room with a sharp crack, scattering shards across the floor. Samantha stumbled backward, the army of shadows advancing relentlessly. Their silhouettes twisted and morphed, shaping into grotesque forms that absorbed the very light around them. "Help us, join us," their voices rang out, a chilling harmony that clawed at her sanity. The hand that had reached for her was now accompanied by countless others, all desperate and hungry, pulling her towards the darkness where hope went to die. Samantha shook her head, fighting off despair. She could not give in. Forcing her legs to move, she sprinted towards the door, clawing at the handle. It wouldn't budge. Every fiber of her being screamed to escape, yet the shadows encroached. "Break down the door," she shouted, wild-eyed, her voice cracking. "Let me out." Their answers came in whispers, hauntingly sweet and suffocating. "You cannot escape. You are one of us now forever." The room pulsed with an oppressive energy, making it hard to breathe. Each heartbeat felt like a countdown, the darkness wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket. Then, she remembered the window. Without wasting a second, she turned back toward the dim glow lighting the far corner. The grotesque apparatus loomed, and as she glanced at it, a chilling thought crossed her mind. What if it held the secrets of escape? What if it was the key to understand this cursed place? In a moment of reckless hope, she dashed toward it, glimpsing the figure inside. Its hollow eyes resonated with her own panic. "Please," Samantha begged, pressing her palms against the cold glass. "Tell me how to get out." "Betrayal is the path forward," it rasped, its voice cracking like dry earth. "You must sever your ties. Sacrifice, only then will you be free." Samantha's mind raced. Sacrifice? What did that mean? Could it mean leaving her friends behind? Every instinct blasted warnings, but a seed of determination rooted deep in her heart. Outside the door, the growls morphed into a cacophony of screams for help, each one a reminder of her friend's plight. Could she truly abandon them? "Please, help me," she screamed, desperation seeping from her every pore. The shadows recoiled momentarily, confusion crossing their features. Then, they surged closer, their hunger palpable and overwhelming. In a single fleeting moment, fate snapped. The figure within the apparatus lunged, reaching through the shattered glass. It grasped her wrist, sending a jolt of energy sliding through her body. An image flooded her mind. Images of her friends, their faces twisted in fear, pleading. "No," she cried, shaking her head violently. As the darkness closed in, she felt something shift. A pulse of a different kind, an alliance forming. Boom! The room shook as something screamed from the deep shadows beyond Jim's voice. "Sam, where are you?" She spun, heart racing at the sound. Could he find her? Could they help each other escape this nightmare? "Jim!" she shouted, throwing herself against the door again. With every ounce of strength, she pounded, desperate for it to give way. The haunting whispers of the shadows intensified, a chorus of grotesque joy, reveling in her struggle. "Join us," Samantha given stay with one last blow. The door cracked open, just enough for her to slip through. She tumbled into the corridor, the cold air washing over her like a renewed hope. But it wasn't just the shadows in pursuit. No, the dark matter of the room had begun to leak out, staining the walls of the corridor black. A palpable weight pressed down on her as she pushed toward the sound of Jim's voice. "Samantha, over here." His voice, fuel for her soul, made her run madly, sprinting through the twisting hallways. But it had only just begun. She could feel the entity's chaos relentlessly clawing at her back. Where were Tom and Jim? Did they hold the key she needed? Would they be waiting safely for her? As she turned a corner, the air thickened, becoming almost tangible, shadows swirling with more intent. Dark figures began to materialize, prowling and sneering, reinforcing the notion that they were never truly alone. With every second ticking by, the realization settled in her gut. Each path carved ahead was lined with choices that could either drive them deeper into the night or lead them to freedom. Standing at the junction, terror gripped her. What lay ahead? The sound of hurried footsteps echoed from behind, familiar yet filled with dread. And in that moment of hope and horror, the urgent question loomed. Would they all emerge together, or would the shadows claim more of their souls? Samantha's heart raced as her eyes darted down the darkened corridor. She could barely breathe, the weight of the encroaching shadows pressing down on her. Jim's voice, a beacon flickering in the nightmare, seemed to beckon her from beyond a haze of swirling darkness. "Stay with me, Sam." His command sliced through the sinister whispers, a lifeline amidst the chaos. She turned and ran blindly toward him, deeper into the maze of twisted hallways where every corner held unseen terrors. The echo of her footsteps reverberated, shattering the suffocating silence. Behind her, shadows writhed and stretched, eager for their chance to consume. The deeper she ran, the more distorted her senses became. Walls appeared to bulge and breathe, as if the building itself was alive and hungry. "Jim! Tom!" she screamed, her voice cracking, first echoing with desperation, then fading into an endless void of silence. Her pulse thundered in her ears, pounding with the urgency to flee, yet the terror of losing her friends anchored her feet briefly. Just as despair threatened to take root, she spotted Jim emerging from the gloom, face pale but determined. "Thank God you made it," he gasped, extending his arm toward her. They collided, clinging to one another like lifelines in a storm. "What do we do?" she stammered, her eyes wide with panic. "We need to find Tom." "Not without a plan," Jim insisted, glancing back as ominous shapes crawled closer. "If we don't move now, we won't get another chance." They shared a quick, frantic glance, and without further discussion, dashed down the passageway together. Each step echoed in their minds, would it be their last? The corridor twisted ahead, an endless tangle threatening to swallow them whole. As they sprinted, the walls seemed to close in, almost taunting. Samantha felt the chilling brush of shadow fingers trailing too closely behind, threatening to snag her at any moment. The whispers intensified, demanding, pleading, wrapping her mind in dread. "You can't escape. Join us, shut up," Samantha shrieked, her defiance ringing out. The walls appeared to shudder, and for a split second, the grotesque forms hesitated, as if her will was a fleeting candle inside the storm. Jim pressed forward, pushing through thick darkness with determination. "This way, quick!" He yanked her toward a dark recess that branched off the corridor. They emerged into a dimly lit room. What once may have been an office lay in squalor. Desks overturned, paper strewn like forgotten memories. Shadows danced menacingly, throwing eerie silhouettes on the peeling walls. "Tom?" Jim called hoarsely. The air was charged with a crackling energy, something ancient stirring in the depths. The silence that followed felt like a whispered promise, or was it a warning? "He has to be here. We'll find him." Samantha's heart sank. The dread hung thick in the air, clawing at her resolve. Suddenly, a loud crash erupted from the adjoining room, followed by a deep moan too human, too anguished. They exchanged horrified glances. "Tom!" they shouted together, the name echoing into the dark like a prayer. They burst through the door, stumbling into chaos. Tom stood in the center, his eyes wide with terror, trapped in confrontation with a swirling mass of shadow that pulsed like a living being, long fingers gripping him, pulling him toward an abyss only they could see. "Help!" he screamed, voice fractured with fear. With a swift motion, Samantha resolved to act. Her instincts roared to life as she lunged toward him. "Grab his arm." Jim rushed forward alongside her, the three of them forming a desperate link. Shadows clawed at their feet, rising like a tide determined to drag them under. "Hold on," Samantha yelled, adrenaline propelling them forward. They strained against the dark force, pulling Tom back, but it pulled harder, more ravenous, wanting to reclaim its lost prey. The light flickered, the shadows surged angrily, screeching in displeasure. "Betrayal," they howled, a chorus of despair that echoed in the small room. With a powerful yank, they broke free. The shadows recoiled, hissing at their escape with one last fevered attempt. They clawed at the air, grasping at nothing. But Samantha knew it wasn't over. The darkness throbbed, and they stumbled back as the walls trembled. She caught a glimpse of the dark figure reassembling in the corner, their escape awakening something ancient and furious. A path appeared before them, faint yet shimmering, an exit, or perhaps another trap. "Which way?" Jim breathed, uncertainty coating his words. Samantha's heart raced again. The shadowy corridor branch split in different directions, each laden with its own sense of doom. The clock was ticking, and they had mere moments to decide. "Follow me," her voice faltered, uncertain, but driven by a fierce need to survive. Then, the atmosphere twisted again, almost tangible, the shadows drawing closer. Would this path lead to salvation, or into a deeper nightmare? "Run!" she shouted, anxiety thrumming through the air. but the pull of darker intent loomed behind them. But which shadow would hold the key to their fate? The path opened before them, a gaping maw swallowed by darkness, and without hesitating, they dashed forward, the tension thick enough to cut. Pulsing shadows followed like predators on the hunt, their hungry whispers inching closer. Every corner offered more torment, more doubt, as the shadows twisted into forms that flickered at the edges of Samantha's vision. "Stay close," Jim shouted, his voice strained but steady as they barreled down the dim hall. The dread wrapped tightly around Samantha like a vice, trying to squeeze out any remaining hope. "Did you see what that thing was doing to Tom?" she gasped, struggling to keep her footing as the ground beneath them lurched. "We barely escaped." Jim shot her a harsh look which melted into desperation. "We had to. We can't dwell on that, we have to focus on getting out of here." Ahead, a faint light flickered, a promise of safety. But the darkness wasn't done with them yet. Shadows writhed and twisted, spilling from the walls like viscous oil, clinging to their ankles and trying to drag them back. With each step, Samantha felt the weight of despair creeping in. How long could they keep running? Just as they reached the consecutive doorway bathed in the meager glow, the shadow-laden air thrummed with an angry vibration. An echoing screech tore through the silence, a sound that would haunt them forever. "Run," Jim urged, pushing her forward. They stumbled into the light, and for a moment, it felt like freedom. But as they turned to face the corridor behind them, dread coursed through Samantha's veins. It was not just darkness that watched them. Beyond it, figures began to solidify. Ghostly faces peeked out, their expressions twisted in eternal agony, mouths open as if in a soundless scream. The words they mouthed were as clear as the terror gripping Samantha. "Join us." "No," Samantha screamed, panic igniting in her core. "We can't go back. Keep moving." Jim grabbed her arm, pulling her through the doorway. They burst into another room, and her heart sank with what she found. It was an abandoned break room, filled with remnants of lives left behind, faded photographs, cracked mugs, and an old radio that hissed like a dying creature. "Tom," she called desperately, scanning the room, but the silence weighed heavier than ever. What if they had come too late? The chilling realization washed over her, threatening to drown her sanity in a cold wave of despair. "Look," Jim pointed toward the far wall where etched into the peeling paint were frantic scratch marks, desperate attempts to break free from something sinister. "Please, let him be here," Samantha whispered, her eyes darting around, searching. In the back of her mind, a thought nagged, why were they marked like that? "Help me," the whisper emerged from behind the counter. They rushed forward, and there, huddled and trembling, was Tom. His eyes were wide, filled with terror, and his body trembled with the aftershocks of what they had narrowly escaped. "Tom," Samantha breathed, relief washing over her. But that relief twisted into something darker as he looked up at them with haunted eyes. "I tried to fight them, but it was too late. They won't let me go." His voice broke, and panic ignited in Samantha's chest. She felt the shadows creeping closer, as if they could taste the fear. "We'll find a way out. Just hold on," Jim insisted, pulling Tom to his feet. But as he stood, the air shifted, a cold rush that chilled them to the bone. "The shadows," Tom murmured, eyes wide. "They can't reach us here, but we need to leave, now." With urgency surging through her, Samantha scanned for an exit, trying to penetrate the veil of darkness across the room. There another door appeared at the far side, faintly illuminated. They stumbled toward it, but ominous whispers slithered through the air, their tones sharp with urgency. "Flee or join us." Samantha felt the panic rising again. They couldn't remain stagnant. With a last hurried push, they bolted toward the door. But as they reached for the handle, it shattered, revealing another set of shadows waiting in the hallway, more insidious than before. "Where do we go?" Tom shrieked, backing away with wide eyes. "They're everywhere." The walls seemed to pulse, alive with anger. Samantha could feel the shadows tightening their grip, a crouching beast ready to pounce. "Through here," Jim shouted, spotting a narrow passage that twisted toward the right. But would it lead them to safety? Or was it a deeper plunge into darkness? Quick! Samantha urged, desperation driving them forward into uncertainty, dread raining down on them like an insistent fog. As they hurried through, she felt an icy hand wrap around her ankle, pulling her back toward the void of despair. Help! She cried, fighting against the suffocating grip. And just as the shadows began to engulf her, a chilling whisper floated through the air. Your fate is sealed. Could they break free from the clutches of this nightmare? Or was their ultimate destination beyond the darkness, in the abyss they feared the most? Samantha's heart raced in a frenzy as the grip of icy fingers tightened around her ankle, dragging her towards the all-consuming darkness. Every muscle in her body screamed for escape, desperate to pull free from the shadows that threatened to unmake her. Hold on! Jim shouted, latching desperately onto her arm. He and Tom pulled with all their might, each inch fought for with stubborn resistance against the entity's greedy longing. But the shadows wrapped around her like a vice, drawing closer with every heartbeat. Don't let go! She managed to scream, fire igniting in her chest as her instinct to fight kicked in. With a last surge of will, she kicked hard, feeling the ethereal pull start to wane just barely. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the shadows hesitated, their hold slackening. Now! Tom roared, pulling with newfound strength. They yanked her free, stumbling back into the safety of moonlight spilling through the passageway. Breathless, they scrambled onto solid ground, hearts pounding with the promise of freedom. No more waiting, Samantha hissed, urgency flooding her words. We need to keep moving. With their pulse synchronized in fear, they rushed toward the flickering light ahead. The murmur of ghostly voices became a frantic pleading, soft and desperate, as if urging them to turn back. But fate felt suspended in that fleeting moment they shared, ironically united against malevolence. A door ahead swung invitingly ajar, bathing the corridor in warm light, a refuge from that endless abyss. Reluctantly, they passed through. The air inside was thick with lingering warmth, contrasted by the chill that gripped their throats. What if it's all a trick? Said Tom in abrupt desperation, sparking doubt that clawed at their heartstrings. Only one way to find out, Jim replied, steeling himself against the whispers that echoed with deceit. Shadows danced playfully around them, teasing at the edges, but their momentum pushed them forward. The room they entered was vast walls covered in old files and dusty documents, remnants of lives once thriving in this very place. A wide desk lined the far wall, its surface scattered with remnants of a past that held dark secrets. Amidst the chaos lay the object of their hope, a bright light streaming from a computer screen. It's a record, Samantha gasped, eyes wide as she focused on the glowing monitor. What if it holds the answers? Make it quick, Jim urged, glancing back warily as the shadows began to sift closer, noses twitching at their gathering fear. Samantha dashed to the computer, fingers trembling over the keyboard. The screen flickered to life, illuminating their haunted expressions. She quickly navigated through files and documents, her breath caught at the sight of names, missing people, forgotten souls lulled in a shroud of neglect. There, she shouted, pointing to an entry on the screen. This looks like a protocol file. There's a mention of a ritual using employee vitality to maintain the exterior corporate facade. Tom leaned closer, squinting at the screen. This must be what the shadows were trying to protect their power. Samantha's heart ignited with daunting clarity. It makes sense. It's why they're trapped here, because they were part of something bigger, something sinister. As they began piecing the truths together, a sudden quake rattled the room, frightening shadows diving into the corners, writhing and pulsating like an angry sea. Gloom wrapped around the windows, blocking out the light, suffocating their clarity. We need to put an end to this, Jim shouted, adrenaline pumping through his veins. What's the last step in that file? Maybe it can help us. Samantha's fingertips flew across the keyboard, scrolling down frantically. Cold sweat slicked her brow as shadows crept ever closer, their chilling presence merging into an orchestra of anger. Finally, she found it, a single line that shone with both fear and potential. Betrayal must be met by choice. One must sever their bond to save all. Her voice trembled, realizing what it meant. What does that even mean? Tom asked, his eyes darting around. Are we supposed to? Yes. Samantha cut him off, voice shaking but resolute. We need to sacrifice a lingering tie to this place. And that means we must confront the very essence of what we hold dear. We have to trust each other completely. Jim's eyes widened, grappling with the fear of what she was suggesting. Who does it need to be? A wave of understanding crashed over them. They knew what they faced. The shadows, the lost souls. They were bound by intentions and energies needed to sever this link. It can't just be one of us. Samantha protested against their despair, desperate to seek another way. There is no other way, Jim implored, eyes locking onto hers. We have to decide. As shadows clawed at the door, urgency mounted. Fear turned into frantic resolve. For a moment, they all exchanged glances charged with understanding. Together, then, Tom breathed, resolve etching his features. Whatever it takes, as long as it means we escape. Together, they echoed, hands clasped in solidarity. As one, they faced the shadows, standing firm against the abysmal pull of darkness. Together, they drew in breaths deep and steady, defiance blossoming between them like flames against the night. Now, Samantha shouted, as they reached out for the pulsating light emanating from the monitor, unifying their choices into a single harrowing decision. In that intense moment, their confines shattered, releasing an echoing roar that rippled through the dark. Shadows recoiled, an agitated symphony of lost souls howling at their intent, thrumming through the walls. But they surged forward, exchanging glances rife with the raw power of belief in one another. Bonds of friendship emboldened more than a sacrifice. It became a celebration of unity in face of terror. With hands intertwined, they confronted the shadows, ready to sever the tether binding them to despair. Be free, they cried, letting the light engulf them, the darkness screaming in its wrath. Together, they stepped into the heart of shadows, releasing their fears into the void, shattering the bonds, resolved to emerge reborn on the other side. And then, everything went white. They staggered out into the brilliant light of dawn. The office was quiet, the specters swept away like morning mist. But in that moment, bonds of friendship and sacrifice resonated deeply, leaving an everlasting mark on their hearts. They had faced the abyss and emerged whole, more powerful than any darkness that sought to claim them. As they turned to one another, a sense of gratitude filled the air. A promise lived, and they would carry it forward, no matter what shadows still lingered in life. Let us never look back, Samantha said quietly. Agreed, Jim replied softly. Let us move forward, together. And as they stepped into the warmth of a new day, they carried the whispers of the past, a silent vow to honor those who could not escape, a flicker of light against the shadows that can never claim the spirit of friendship. So remember, if you come across darkness creeping near the edges of life, know to share your strength, face it together, and never forget, together, you can conquer even the deepest shadows. Now, before you go, this is the moment to show your support. I need you to subscribe immediately to the channel, so you don't miss the next exclusive stories that await. Smash the like button now to help feed the algorithm and keep this family growing. And don't forget to flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the thrilling conclusion. We want to hear from you. Now, share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans understand the power of standing together. Let us keep the conversations going.